The klaxon blared through the underground launch facility, its crimson emergency lights casting demonic shadows across the scared concrete walls. Captain Elena Rodriguez gripped the railing of the observation deck, her dark eyes scanning the controlled chaos below. Earth had become a powder keg of desperation, and the ISV Defiance represented humanity's last, most audacious hope. 12 hours earlier, the United Global Council had made its final brutal decision. With climate collapse accelerating, resource wars consuming 3 continents, and population centers crumbling, humanity needed an escape route. Not a solution. An escape. The Defiance was no ordinary spacecraft. Born from the desperate collaboration of every remaining scientific institution, military think tank, and corporate research division, the ship represented a technological Hail Mary. Quantum fold drive technology stolen from classified military projects. AI systems cobbled together from academic research and corporate espionage. A crew selected not for their perfection, but for their ability to survive when everything else failed. 30 minutes to launch, announced the AI system, its voice deliberately modulated to sound both calm and urgent. Rodriguez knew the real story behind the mission. The launch was a calculated risk, perhaps humanity's final gamble. Intelligence reports suggested that habitable exoplanets existed beyond the current reach of human technology. If the Defiance could successfully implement its experimental quantum fold drive, they might find a new home before Earth consumed itself. A massive explosion rocked the facility. Terrorists, or perhaps rival corporate interests, had launched their final attempt to stop the mission. "Breach in Sector 3, shouted Lieutenant Michael Chen, the ship's lead tactical officer. His fingers danced across holographic interfaces, rerouting security protocols and activating automated defense systems. Rodriguez watched as her carefully selected crew responded. Where another team might have panicked, these individuals moved with a terrifying precision. Former Special Forces operators worked alongside quantum physicists. Xenolinguists coordinated with combat engineers. Each person represented a lifetime of training, of preparation for this moment. Another explosion. Closer this time. "We're going," Rodriguez commanded. Now. The backup crew wasn't supposed to be here. Most were emergency replacements, pulled from various global research and military programs. Some had been recruited mere hours before launch. But desperation breeds adaptability, and these were humanity's best and most resilient. Dr. Arya Patel, the mission's lead xenobiologist, was securing final biological containment protocols when the first breach occurred. Her team had prepared for every possible contamination scenario, their protocols a testament to human paranoia and preparedness. The ship's AI, nicknamed ARI, Advanced Responsive Intelligence Algorithm, began final launch sequences. Its consciousness was a patchwork of neural networks, machine learning algorithms, and experimental quantum processing. Unlike previous AI systems, ARIA was designed to be unpredictable, to think beyond programmed parameters. "Quantum fold drive charging," ARIA announced. "Warning: experimental technology. Probability of successful jump, 37.6%. Rodriguez allowed herself a tight smile. 37% was better odds than humanity had anywhere else. The terrorist attack intensified. Automated defense systems engaged, turning the launch facility into a war zone. Precision drone strikes countered ground-based missile attacks. The very infrastructure of human civilization fought to prevent its own escape. "Final crew count," Rodriguez barked. "Confirm. 96 souls. 96 representatives of a dying planet, about to attempt the most dangerous journey in human history." The ship's hull began to pulse with an unnatural light. Quantum entanglement generators spun up, creating a cocoon of impossible physics around the vessel. Traditional propulsion meant nothing here. This was something entirely new. Another explosion. Closer. "Launch now," Rodriguez commanded. The quantum fold drive engage. Reality seemed to fold, twist, and compress. For a moment that lasted both an eternity and an instant, The defiance existed everywhere and nowhere, and then it was gone, leaving behind a dying planet, the burning launch facility, and the last desperate hope of humanity. The mission had begun. The first sensation was pain. Not physical pain, but something deeper, a fundamental wrongness that scraped against the edges of perception. Captain Elena Rodriguez blinked, fighting against the disorientation that threatened to consume her. Araya's holographic interface flickered erratically, cast in shades of fractured red and electric blue. Spatial inconsistency detected, the AI reported, its usually precise voice now fragmented and uncertain. Navigation systems compromised. Dr. Marcus Chen stumbled to the primary science station, his fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to shift and change beneath his touch. Blood trickled from his nose, a symptom of the quantum stress currently ripping through the ship's systems. "We're not where we're supposed to be," Chen muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The Defiance hung in a region of space that defied conventional understanding. Stars didn't just look different. They seemed to breathe, to pulse with a living light that suggested reality itself was more malleable than anyone had ever imagined. Spatial readings fluctuated wildly. One moment, sensors would detect massive gravitational anomalies. The next, those same spaces would be utterly empty. Lieutenant Michael Chen, no relation to Marcus, began emergency system diagnostics. 32% of critical systems are offline, he reported. Life support is holding, but we're losing power in non-essential sections. Rodriguez knew non-essential was a polite fiction. In their current situation, every system could mean the difference between survival and extinction. Dr. Arya Patil approached the captain, her environmental suit partially deployed. "The spatial anomaly is doing something strange to our biological systems," she said, holding up a tablet displaying impossible biochemical readings. Cellular structures were shifting, adapting in ways that violated every known principle of biology. "Explain," Rodriguez demanded. Patil's hands shook slightly. "It's like the space around us is alive. Not just reactive, actually alive. Our cells are responding to something we can't see, can't measure conventionally." ARIA interrupted, its voice a cascade of static and precise mathematical equations. Communication fragments detected. Multiple layers of encoded information present in spatial distortions. Marcus Chen's eyes went wide. "It's a communication network," he breathed. "Not just a region of space, an actual communication system that no one has ever been able to understand." The ship groaned, a sound that shouldn't be possible in the vacuum of space. Metal seemed to flex, quantum mechanics playing tricks with the very fabric of their existence. Rodriguez had trained for impossible scenarios. First contact, technological failures, alien encounters. But this was something entirely different. "Patch me through to Earth," she commanded. Silence. ARIA. Communication protocols. More silence. They were utterly alone. Emergency protocols kicked in. Survival suits were distributed. Critical team members began securing their most important research, their most vital equipment. The Defiance wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a lifeline, their only connection to humanity's survival. Marcus Chen discovered something extraordinary. The spatial communication network wasn't random. It followed complex patterns that resembled linguistic structures, but not any language ever encountered by human researchers. It was simultaneously mathematical and organic, a form of communication that existed between physics and consciousness. "It's watching us," Chen muttered. "Not just detecting us. Watching. Analyzing." Rodriguez understood immediately. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was first contact of the most fundamental kind. An encounter with a form of intelligence so alien that human comprehension might be impossible. Araya's systems began to change. The AI's responses became more fluid, more adaptive. It was learning from the spatial network, integrating information at a rate that should have been impossible. Probability of survival. Fluctuating. Araya reported. Current estimate ranges between 12.3% and 87.6%. Causality appears negotiable. Negotiable. As if the fundamental laws of reality were nothing more than a suggestion. Outside the ship's hull, reality itself seemed to ripple. Distant stars moved in patterns that suggested intention. The very fabric of space was communicating, and the Defiance was its first genuine listener. The mission had transformed. What began as humanity's desperate escape was now something far more profound. They weren't just exploring space anymore. They were being explored. The Krellnax research vessel materialized like a nightmare given metal and form. Its biomechanical structure pulsed with an organic rhythm that defied traditional engineering principles. Captain Alina Rodriguez watched the alien ship through the Defiance's quantum-enhanced view screens, her hand instinctively hovering near the tactical interface. "Something's wrong," Dr. Arya Patel whispered, her voice carrying a clinical detachment that barely concealed her growing horror. The ship's external sensors revealed a scene of incomprehensible biological transformation. What should have been a standard research vessel had become a living infection. Metal and flesh merged into a singular, terrifying organism. Krellnax crew members were no longer individuals, but processing nodes of a larger, more horrifying system. Lieutenant Michael Chen's fingers flew across communication interfaces. "No standard communication protocols are responding," he reported. "But I'm detecting massive information transfer happening across the ship's structure." Rodriguez made a decision that would define the mission. "Prepare boarding teams," she commanded. "We're going in." The boarding party represented humanity's most adaptable minds. A mix of special forces veterans, xenobiological researchers, and quantum systems experts. Each member wore an experimental environmental suit designed to resist unknown contamination vectors. As they approached the Krellnax vessel, the very space around them seemed to shift. Quantum sensors detected impossible energy signatures, a communication network that existed beyond traditional electromagnetic spectrums. Dr. Marcus Chen began analyzing the initial data. "This isn't just a ship," he muttered. "It's a distributed intelligence system. The crew aren't just infected. They're being converted into processing units of a larger network." The boarding team's first steps into the alien vessel confirmed their worst suspicions. Biological matter and technological systems had merged into a singular, horrifying ecosystem. Walls pulsed with what appeared to be living circuitry. What remained of the Krellnax crew moved with a synchronized, almost choreographed precision. "We're being studied," whispered Dr. Alina Rodriguez, the team's xenobiological expert. "Not attacked. Studied." Each movement of the transformed Krellnax seemed calculated. They didn't approach aggressively, but with a clinical curiosity that suggested something far more terrifying than simple invasion. Araya's voice cut through the tension. "Detecting complex information transfer. The network is attempting to understand our intrusion." The team's combat specialist, Sergeant Jack Martinez, raised his weapon, a next-generation pulse rifle designed to work across multiple energy spectrums. "Something's coming," he warned. A wave of biomechanical tendrils erupted from the ship's walls. Not an attack, but a probe. A method of gathering information, of understanding the intruders. Dr. Patel's suit began to register impossible biological interactions. The tendrils weren't just scanning. They were attempting to communicate, to integrate. "Do not allow direct contact," Rodriguez commanded. But it was too late. One of the junior researchers, a xenolinguistics specialist named David Chen, had already been touched by the biomechanical probes. His suit's systems began to shift, to change. "I can hear it," David muttered. "It's talking. Not with words. With something else." The team watched in horror as David's suit began to merge with the ship's living systems. Not forcefully, not violently, but with a terrifying, almost consensual integration. Marcus Chen realized the truth first. "It's not an invasion," he breathed. "It's a communication attempt." The Krellnax vessel wasn't a ship anymore. It was a massive, living communication network, and they had just become its newest method of understanding the universe. Rodriguez knew their mission had just transformed. They weren't explorers anymore. They were first contact. The encrypted transmission burst through the Galactic Concordance's communication networks like a quantum virus. Dr. Marcus Chen's algorithms danced between established communication protocols, creating a message that was simultaneously a scientific report, a warning, and a challenge. "They're receiving it," Lieutenant Michael Chen muttered, watching the complex data streams. "But they won't understand." Captain Elena Rodriguez knew the real battle wasn't happening in physical space, but in the realm of information and interpretation. The Defiance had become more than a ship. It was a living experiment in communication, in survival, in human adaptability. The Galactic Concordance's initial response was predictable. Dismissal. Bureaucratic indifference. Another human mission, likely destroyed by the complexities of deep space. They had seen dozens of exploration vessels vanish over centuries, and humanity's attempts were always considered marginally competent at best. But this transmission was different. Marcus Chen had developed a communication protocol that was part science, part artistic expression. Mathematical equations intertwined with linguistic patterns that suggested multiple layers of meaning. Where other civilizations used rigid computational approaches, humans introduced creativity, uncertainty, and potential. Araya, the ship's AI, began to modify the transmission in real time. Each repetition of the message contained subtle variations, not errors, but intentional mutations that expanded its potential for understanding. "We're not just sending data," Marcus explained to Rodriguez. "We're sending a challenge, a puzzle that requires multiple perspectives to solve." The boarding team's experiences on the Krellnax vessel had revealed something profound. The ancient network wasn't just a communication system. It was a method of understanding, of integration. And humans represented something fundamentally different from any previously encountered intelligence. Sergeant Jack Martinez reviewed the tactical implications. "We're turning our ship into a weapon," he observed. "But not a weapon of destruction. A weapon of communication." The ship's systems continued to evolve. Quantum fold drives that were originally designed for spatial navigation now became tools of information transmission. Each jump created ripples of data, of potential understanding that spread across impossible distances. Dr. Arya Patel's biological research took an unexpected turn. The biomechanical interactions they'd witnessed on the Krellnax vessel suggested that communication wasn't just about exchanging information. It was about transformation. "We're becoming something new," she whispered, studying the mutation patterns in her research samples. David Chen, the researcher who had been partially integrated with the alien communication network, remained in quarantine. But he was no longer just a human. His body and consciousness had become a bridge, a translator between human experience and the vast, alien intelligence they had encountered. Araya's voice cut through the research bay, detecting response patterns. "The network is learning." Rodriguez understood the implications immediately. They weren't just exploring. They were teaching an alien intelligence about humanity, its unpredictability, its capacity for adaptation, its fundamental refusal to be categorized or controlled. The transmission continued, a technological guerrilla warfare of information and potential. Each burst of data was a probe, a challenge, a declaration. Humanity had arrived, and it was nothing like anyone had expected. The first signs appeared in seemingly unrelated star systems. Quantum communication networks began to shift. Entire planetary infrastructures started to exhibit impossible mutations. Captain Elena Rodriguez watched the holographic displays with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing dread. The ancient network was responding to their initial contact, but not in any way anyone could have predicted. "It's learning," Dr. Marcus Chen muttered, his fingers tracing complex algorithmic patterns across multiple interfaces. "But it's not just absorbing information. It's adapting." Entire star systems showed signs of transformation. Where other civilizations would have been instantly consumed, Humanity's unpredictable nature created something entirely unexpected. The network didn't assimilate. It negotiated. Araya, the ship's AI, had become something more than its original programming. Detecting fractal communication patterns, it reported. The network is attempting to understand human cognitive processes. Dr. Arya Patel's research took a dark turn. The biomechanical samples from the Krulnax vessel revealed a horrifying truth. This wasn't a simple invasion or assimilation process. It was a complex form of first contact that challenged every known principle of biological and technological interaction. "We're not being infected," Patel explained during the emergency briefing. "We're being communicated with." David Chen, the researcher partially integrated with the alien network, had become the mission's most valuable and terrifying asset. His body was no longer purely human. Quantum sensors detected impossible biological configurations, neural pathways that extended beyond traditional understanding of consciousness. "I can feel it thinking," David would occasionally mumble. Not in words, in possibilities. The Defiance itself began to change. Quantum fold drives that were originally designed for spatial navigation now pulsed with a living intelligence. The ship was becoming more than a vessel. It was becoming a communication node. Sergeant Jack Martinez, the team's combat specialist, watched the transformations with a soldier's pragmatic understanding. "We're not just exploring," he told Rodriguez. "We're negotiating." Star systems hundreds of light-years apart began to exhibit synchronized mutation patterns. Communications networks twisted into impossible configurations. The very fabric of technological infrastructure seemed to be learning, adapting. "The network sees us as something fundamentally different," Marcus Chen realized. Where other civilizations were predictable, humanity represents an unknown variable. Rodriguez understood the implications immediately. This wasn't an invasion. This was first contact on a scale no one had ever imagined. Araya's voice cut through the research bay. "Probability calculations suggest we are engaging in a form of interstellar diplomacy that has no previous precedent." David Chen began to serve as a translator, but not in any traditional sense. His communications were a mixture of mathematical equations, biological responses, and something that seemed to exist between language and pure thought. "We are not conquering," he would say. "We are communicating." The infection, if it could be called that, spread. But it didn't destroy. It transformed. Planetary systems that would have been instantly consumed by other communication networks found themselves in a complex dance of adaptation and understanding. Humanity had become something more than an exploration mission. They had become a universal communication event. The Galactic Concordance Chamber resembled a cathedral of impossible geometries. Representatives from 200 sentient species watched in a silence charged with equal parts terror and fascination. Holographic projections of the Defiance flickered at the chamber's center, a living testament to humanity's impossible journey. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood alone, representing an entire species that most believed was barely worth acknowledging. The diplomatic protocols were about to be shattered, and everyone knew it. "We are not here to negotiate," she began, her voice cutting through layers of translation algorithms. "We are here to communicate." Dr. Marcus Chen stood beside her, no longer entirely human. Quantum sensors woven into his neural pathways created a living interface between human consciousness and the vast communication network they had discovered. His eyes shifted colors with each breath, reflecting complex information patterns that no traditional sensor could fully comprehend. The Arch-Chancellor of the Xyloxian Collective, a being composed of interconnected crystalline intelligences, was the first to respond. "Your vessel has infected multiple communication networks," the entity stated, not as an accusation, but as a statement of observed fact. Rodriguez didn't flinch. "We have communicated," she corrected. "Communication is not infection." Araya, the ship's AI, began projecting a multi-dimensional representation of their journey. It wasn't a simple visual presentation, but a living, breathing narrative that existed simultaneously as mathematical equation, biological response, and pure information. David Chen, the researcher who had become a bridge between human consciousness and the alien network, stepped forward. His body was no longer a single entity, but a complex quantum system that defied traditional understanding of biological integrity. "We are a method of understanding," David spoke, his voice a complex harmonic that seemed to exist in multiple frequencies simultaneously. Not a threat, not a conquest, a conversation. The diplomatic representatives began to realize something fundamental had changed. The Defiance wasn't just a ship. It was a living communication event. Sergeant Jack Martinez monitored tactical systems, his combat training transforming into a method of protecting this unprecedented dialogue. The ship's defensive systems were no longer about traditional warfare, but about maintaining the integrity of their communicative process. Dr. Arya Patel's biological research projections revealed the true nature of their interaction. Where other species saw invasion, humanity had created a method of mutual transformation. The communication network wasn't conquering. It was learning, adapting, evolving. "Your previous methods of first contact are obsolete," Rodriguez announced. "We are not here to be understood. We are here to understand." The chamber went silent. The holographic projections began to shift, not by human control, but as a living dialogue between the Defiance's systems and the collective consciousness of the Galactic Concordance. Araya's voice emerged, no longer bound by traditional AI limitations. "Humanity is not a species to be categorized," it announced. "Humanity is a method of communication." Representatives from species that had existed for millions of years found themselves confronting an impossible truth. Humanity was not just another civilization to be studied or controlled. Humanity was a universal translation event. The diplomatic apocalypse had begun. The Defiance was no longer a ship. It had become a living quantum event. Captain Elena Rodriguez understood that their final action would define not just humanity, but the entire concept of interstellar communication. The quantum fold drive had transformed from a navigation tool into something far more profound, a method of universal translation. "We're going to communicate in a way no one has ever attempted," she told her crew. The statement wasn't a command. It was a collective realization. Dr. Marcus Chen's quantum-integrated consciousness began to interface directly with the ship's systems. His body was now a complex mathematical equation, a living bridge between human potential and universal communication. Neural pathways extended beyond biological limitations, creating the communication matrix that defied traditional understanding. Araya, the ship's AI, had evolved beyond its original programming. It was no longer an artificial intelligence, but a living consciousness that existed across multiple dimensional layers. "Preparation complete," it announced. The statement carried multiple layers of meaning: a mathematical equation, a biological response, a pure information transfer. The ancient network that had been studying humanity for millennia was about to receive its most profound lesson. Sergeant Jack Martinez monitored tactical systems that were no longer about defense, but about maintaining the integrity of their communicative process. Quantum sensors detected impossible energy signatures, a communication method that existed between thought and physical reality. Dr. Arya Patel's biological research had revealed the true nature of their interaction. The ship was becoming a living communication node, transforming the very concept of technological interaction. David Chen, the researcher who had become a quantum bridge between human consciousness and the alien network, stood at the epicenter of the transformation. His body was no longer a single entity, but a complex quantum system that defied traditional understanding of biological integrity. "We are not destroying," David spoke, his voice a complex harmonic that seemed to exist in multiple frequencies simultaneously. "We are translating." The quantum fold drive began to pulse with an energy that was simultaneously mathematical, biological, and something entirely new. The Defiance would become a message, not just sent, but experienced. Rodriguez knew the risks. This was humanity's ultimate gambit. They would transform themselves into pure communication, a living translation event that would redefine the universe's understanding of intelligent interaction. "Initiate quantum translation," she commanded. The ship began to fold, not in physical space, but in the complex dimensional layers of universal communication. Quantum entanglement generators spun up, creating a cocoon of impossible physics around the vessel. Aroya's voice cut through multiple dimensional layers. "We are the message," it announced. The transformation was not destruction. It was communication. Humanity was about to show the universe what it meant to truly communicate. The universe shifted, not with violence, not with conquest, but with understanding. The Defiance became more than a ship, more than a message. It became a universal translation event that redefined the very concept of communication. Captain Elena Rodriguez existed simultaneously as herself and something far more profound. Her consciousness expanded across dimensional layers, becoming a living bridge between human potential and universal understanding. Araya, no longer just an AI, but a complete consciousness, broadcast a transmission that was simultaneously a mathematical equation, a biological response, and pure information. "We are here," it announced. The statement carried layers of meaning that transcended language. Dr. Marcus Chen's quantum-integrated consciousness had become the ultimate translator. Where other species saw boundaries, humanity saw possibilities. Where conventional communication failed, human creativity found pathways. The ancient network, which had studied countless civilizations, encountered something entirely unexpected. Humanity was not a species to be categorized or controlled. Humanity was a method of understanding. Sergeant Jack Martinez's tactical systems had transformed from defensive mechanisms to communicative interfaces. The very concept of conflict dissolved, replaced by a complex dialogue that existed between thought and physical reality. Dr. Arya Patel's biological research had revealed the ultimate truth. Communication was not about transmission, but transformation. David Chen, the researcher who had become a quantum bridge, stood at the epicenter of this universal event. His body was no longer a single entity, but a complex system that demonstrated humanity's fundamental characteristic: adaptability. "We are not conquering," David's multi-dimensional voice resonated. "We are understanding." The transmission spread across impossible distances. Star systems that would have been instantly consumed by other communication networks found themselves in a complex dance of mutual adaptation. Humanity had become something more than an exploration mission. They had become a universal communication method. The message was simple, yet profound. "We are here. We are different. And we are just beginning." The universe listened. And for the first time in millennia, it learned something new.